So, welcome to this week's Magic the Gathering, or MTG Deck Delve, where I go over one of the decks that I have created and own and show everything out about it. I talk about some strategies when using it, some techniques I use for building it, some of the mechanics that you'll find within it, and various things. So today I'm introducing you to the first of my block or set decks. This one in particular being a Magic the Gathering Origins deck. You couldn't really tell, but that's an Origins card. So let me explain my process for creating an Origins deck to begin with. Then we'll dive into the cards. Here, let me show you the card that I just showed you, and we'll leave that up then. Right there. Cool. Excellent. I figured how to crop these from the previous week. So no longer will you have the top of these things, they will be properly cropped. Isn't that wonderful? Alright, let's of course though talk about the various techniques I use here. So, when I'm creating a block or set deck, such as this one here, whether it's in Standard or not, this one I created long after Origins was out of Standard. It took me a while. Other ones I've created during the time that it's been in Standard. For example, my Scars of Mirrodin decks were created during the time period Scars was Standard. The same could be said for my Ravinica decks. My Khans of Takir deck was at the back end of when it was in Standard, right when it was about to come out. And then this one, I missed the boat for it for a while. But let's talk about how I do this. So, when I buy Magic cards, when I'm designing decks like this, I don't design it with the set in mind. That's the first important thing you're going to have to know about this. I take and buy a fat pack and a box. That's it. So for a single set like this one, where Origins is going to be built alone, I'm using the fat pack and the booster box together. Now, if there are some special packs that would have extra cards in it, like certain starters, things like Planeswalker decks that are coming out now, I will get them and include the cards from them in the building. Any other cards I might get from other sources that would be of the set, I will also include. So if for some random reason I decide to buy a couple of extra booster packs, bam, they're in the entire set that I'm doing. But this is the basis that I use to create these in general. So, in this case, I will then go through that booster box, I will then go through that fat pack, I will take out any cards that I think will be important in my other decks. These are my constructed decks, like the Zoblin deck, like the Merfolk deck. This might be actually some of the things that might show up in the Commander decks. I will go through those first that I know are in the constructed. Then I'm going to take a look at the cards that are very important, and I'll begin the deck building process here. I choose colors. Now, I can choose colors if I want certain mechanics. I can choose colors because I think it would be an interesting color combination to experiment with. Like, for example, this one here is a blue, green, black deck. I made it because I felt, maybe a blue, green, black deck would be interesting to play, and I haven't created that kind of tricolor deck. That's why I did this one. That's the real reason behind this deck's existence and the colors that it has. Other times I do look to certain mechanics. In the original Innistrad, I did a Werewolf deck, I did a Curse deck. In the Scars set, I had an Infect deck and a Phyrexian Mana deck. Both of these are reasons to do certain things. Other color combinations and that are the two good reasons behind it. Tricolor can be a little difficult to play, but you have to make sure your set supports it and that you can build upon it. The deck I built here actually works pretty well for tricolor, but tricolor is, again, you have to be careful with it. You have to have certain things that help you to be a tricolor deck. Like smaller cost things, searching for mana, things that produce any color mana, all help a lot. Is this the best tricolor deck? No. I've had better tricolor decks that are more efficient at using tricolor. Is this one not bad? Yeah. This one is built in such a way that it will function. But it's, again, using the cards I had, and I decided I did want to do a tricolor deck with this one. So there is a level of decision-making when it comes to building these decks here that is important to talk about. Now, I'm only talking about from a single set, Origins. If I'm talking about a block of 2 or 3 sets in it, I will look at all that material when it comes to deck building. Now, for whatever reasons, like for example during the Scars block or during Ixalan, I built decks for the first sets. I will edit those decks when the next set comes out. For the Scars, I edited my original sort of decks, at least one of them, throughout each of the blocks. That was my Infect deck. The other ones came in longer into the set. I actually ended up with 4 Scars decks that I will talk about in time. I actually have 2 Ixalan decks. I might add a third, depending on what I get in the next set, and if there's any kind of other interesting mechanics in the second set of the Ixalan block. That's a good example of it. I have 2 decks for it now. Those will alter as I get more cards. But for Origins here, we have 1 set, 1 fat pack, that's it. And I did get a special thing because I've got the special cards, which I'll talk about these, that are above 272 in number. But, so that's the way I kind of go about building a set or block deck. As I said, for this one, I looked at the colors first, because I looked through all the colors that I owned, and I felt which ones would be the most powerful. That's an important thing. I didn't feel my white or my red had really great stuff that I could build a deck out of that I felt like it would add to it. These 3 colors did, and I could, in the process, have eliminated some of the colors. That can happen. I've done that before. I've started with a tricolor deck and gotten down to a 2-color deck in certain times. This one, I managed to keep enough of all 3 colors in that it felt like it would work. And that's why I kept with 3 colors. Why don't we talk about the deck? And if you have any questions about more of my process about deck building, you can just leave it in the comments here, in the chat here, or the comments, and we'll talk about them. But that's my basic block and set deck building. And that's the only standard I actually do, if we're talking standard Magic, is sets and blocks. So, we start out with, of course, Anchor to Ether. I am going to have 2 of these in the set. Put target creature on top of its owner's library. I stop a creature for a turn. Maybe more, depending on the mana produced for it. And I scry one. Which the scry mechanic is important. I look at the top card of my library, decide to either leave it there, or to put it on the bottom of my library. The thing about this deck, which this will show off is very important, is card drawing. Card drawing appears in, or cycling of cards appears in all 3 color mana. And that's one of the important aspects of this. So, next up, I have Bone to Ash as a counter spell. Counter target creature spell, draw a card. Again, I'm countering a spell and then drawing a card. Counter spells are always good to have at least 1 or 2 of, just in case you come across something that can be helpful. I, again, have 2 of these. We have Claustrophobia. I unfortunately only have 1 Claustrophobia, because from random chance in the cards I got, I only got 1 Claustrophobia. Now, granted, you're saying, like, but it's a common! You should, in theory, in a box and a fat pack, have gotten more than 1 of these. I didn't. So, I have 1 Claustrophobia in the deck. It's one of those weird things that sometimes when you get cards, you don't get certain commons and uncommons. And it's just, again, random chance. You think, like, with rares and how many there are and how many packs you're getting, and mythic rares especially, you're not going to get all of those. And that's true. But commons, uncommons, you can miss those too, or get, like in this case, only 1. So anyway, creature enters the battlefield, tap it. Yeah, exactly. Even commons can be rare. Enters the battlefield, tap the creature. It doesn't untap during its controller's untap step. Basically, you keep something tapped. If it has an activated ability that doesn't rely on tapping, it doesn't shut it down. If it's something you worry about attacking, or it has an actual tap ability, you shut it down. So there is uses to Claustrophobia, but it's more anti-big attacking creature, especially if they don't have a way to untap it. Alright. Dreadwaters. This is one that I put in there just to do some damage to my opponents, in a way. And this is milling their cards. Put the top X cards of target player's library enters their graveyard with X number of lands you control. So, I'm all about lands in this one with very few... There are some, which I will show you, of non-land-based mana production. I'm good about getting extra lands, if anything. The Dreadwaters here, the 2 of them, are a good way of just cutting out some stuff from opponent's deck. And granted, this might not be what they need. This might just be a little bit of annoying. But I felt throwing these in here is a fun thing. That's a really great question, Stark. I usually just play these with my friends. I will take them to events. Like, I brought this one to PAX Unplugged with me. I did get a chance to play this one with someone else. Because it is a modern deck. I can play it in modern. Because modern is anything after the Mirrodin block, which is a long time ago. So these kind of decks I only started doing after Scars of Mirrodin, the second set of block of sets that visited that same plane, that same setting, if you will. So yeah, I will play this with friends in casual. I will friend whether multiplayer or single player, and I will play it if there's a modern kind of event. I usually don't play any kind of decks that I have in any kind of tournaments. I'm not a big tournament person, but if I'm going to a place where people are just casually playing modern or just playing decks, I will bring a deck like this and just pull it out. This deck will eventually become sleeved. That's an important thing to note about it too. I do get sleeves and sleeve up a lot of decks. I have a whole slew of them. Let's move on to the next card, though. Fairy Miscreant. Now, Fairy Miscreant, the reason I put it in here, it's a 1/1 flyer for 1 blue mana. That's really good. Now, its other ability, when it enters the battlefield, if you control another creature called Fairy Miscreant, draw a card. That's awesome. But that wasn't the important thing. That's why I only put 2 Fairy Miscreants in here. I could have put more, but again, that's not the point of it. It's a 1/1 flyer for 1 blue mana. And it's good. Turn to Frog. Now, this is very similar to Claustrophobia, as I only got 1. Now, granted, this is uncommon, so it can happen. It's a better chance to happen. They only get 1 of it. Until end of turn, target creature loses all its abilities and becomes a blue frog with a power and toughness of 1/1. So, this is great that if you're attacking with a really big creature, now it's a 1/1, and I can easily kill it off with my whatever creature I have in front of you. Just smash. Or if I just need to disable a defender, there's a lot of points where Turn to Frog can be useful. Both attacking and defending. Also, because it loses all its abilities, if you're attempting to activate an ability with the creature, I could counter that by turning it into a frog until end of turn. And be like, well, you were attempting to activate your ability, but now you're a frog. You don't actually have that ability. Too bad. I hope, Stark, that answered your questions there. If you feel like it didn't answer everything completely, just let me know in chat. Alright, so those are the actual blue cards we have in here. Now, that didn't seem like a lot, but we did have, of course, 2 of a whole bunch of them. So we're going to move on to our black cards that we added in here. And you can see these are mostly instants or sorceries with 1 enchantment and 2 creatures. That was our source of our blue. Instant sorceries and some card drawing. Blightcaster. Now, Blightcaster, I don't have so many enchantments that it's the most useful thing in the deck. It's not made to be a super game-winning effect and be the focus of the deck. No, because I didn't have enough good enchantments to do that. Instead, this is all about control, which is what blue, black, and mostly do, is control. When you cast an enchantment, you have target creature get -2/-2 until end of turn. I have enough enchantments that this means I can kill off key creatures. And that's about it. I can kill off key creatures with this. I can use it in a way of exactly that. I cast an enchantment, something else gets -2/-2. I claustrophobe one of your really big creatures, and then I kill off something else that's maybe smaller and more useful. I have 2 Blightcasters in this deck. Now we have another small common creature, Fetid Imp. It's a 1/2 flying for 2 mana, but you can give it Death Touch until end of turn. And that's the important part of why I included the Fetid Imp here. Death Touch is a threat. Death Touch is an important threat because people don't like losing creatures in matchups, especially when I have this small thing, which could easily block your really big creature and kill it off. I could just activate Death Touch and be like, hey, guess what? You just got murdered. It just Death Touched you. You're gone. You're done. And it only took me 1 black mana. Meaning if I leave that 1 black mana, it's a threat, which most people will try to shy away from. Granted, it's not a guarantee. It's a threat that's made to basically slow down your opponent's want to advance towards you. You can get rid of bigger creatures with it. So I have 2 Fetid Imps in here, just to get a little bit of taste of them and a little bit of defense. Next up, we have Infernal Scarring, which again we have 2 of. When an enchanted creature gets +2/+0, and when this creature dies, draw a card. I throw this onto something that doesn't matter if it dies, let's say like the Imp or the Fairies, and I make them mean. If I throw it on the Imp, it is now a 3/2 that I can give Death Touch. They're probably not going to want to block with really big creatures. They might chump small creatures to it. But now it turned from that 1/2 that was sort of threatening to a 3/2, and that's a good chunk of damage. 3/2 is a very good chunk of damage. And the thing is, you maybe not want to kill it right away anyway, because I get a card then too. Now, if I combine this, of course, with the Blight Casters, I'm giving something -2/-2 when I play this to begin with. You know, so there is a good use in comboing this in, and it has use with some of the other cards around there. It makes it that, yes, you know this thing is big and mean, but you also know, I want it to die. I want that card. So are you helping me by killing it off? What are you going to do about this? Makes my opponent think and puts them on a defensive end rather than offensive, and that's the important thing about it. Now, I do have 2 Necromantic Summons. This is returning a card from my graveyard to the battlefield, and if there's 2 or more instants or sorceries, which you've seen, I've got a whole bunch of instants or sorceries already in here that I can easily fill up. It comes in the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters, so it comes back bigger. I could use this to get back a very big creature, which I'll show you all the big creatures I have, or to get something back that might really help me out. Let's say like the Imp, if I need some sudden defense. I can just... And because it actually has an important words there, put a creature card from a graveyard. Not your graveyard, a graveyard. I combine this with Dreadwaters. I move a bunch of their stuff into their graveyard. Oh, your big creature went into your graveyard. Mine now. It's mine. I can steal stuff from other people too. And that's why Necromantic Summons is very powerful in that case. The 2 +1/+1 counters would be great, but it's not the important part of it. It's the fact that I could throw something into your graveyard and then get it under my control. Take it for my own, just to throw it out there. And granted, this could be from killing it originally, something with the Death Touch, or with the Dreadwaters to mill it away. Lots of good combinations. Or bringing something of my own back. Necromantic Summons has a lot of power behind it. Read the Bones. Scry 2, meaning I look at the top 2 cards in my library, I choose to put them back on there, or on the bottom of my library, then I draw 2 cards and lose 2 life. This is a very good one. It's another card draw. It allows me to scry the 2, which means that, let's say I look at the 2, if I don't need lands, I can get rid of lands. If it's a certain card that I'm like, oh, Fairy Miscreant, I don't need that right now. Bottom of my library, I'll draw something else. It allows me to pick and choose a little bit. Now, granted, I do lose 2 life when I use it, but that's a worthy trade. Hence why I have 2 of these. Now, we also have 2 of Shadows of the Past. So when a creature dies, scry 1. Now, you may say, why do you need 2 of these? Well, because each one would go off one after another. So if I have both out, the first one triggers... I look at the top card, I can choose to put it back or the bottom of my library. Now, if I put it back on top of my library, that means I really want it. The other instance of scrying one doesn't matter. But if I, let's say, have enough lands, look at it, oh, it's another land? I don't need a land. Bottom of my library, look at the next card. Is that also a land? Oh, yes, it is. 2 lands gone that I did not need, and some stuff that I've now revealed. Now, its other ability, which each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life, if I have 4 or more creature cards in my graveyard, well, I'm not necessarily looking to activate that, but if in a longer battle I've had a bunch of creatures die, that might be something to do. Especially if I combine it with things like the Infernal Scarring, where I want them to die. Well, that means I'm going to have more creature cards in my graveyard. Let's see here. This deck is, I think, let me count it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6... I forgot to actually count this up. It's like a 70, I think I ended up with it. Is that 20 I counted? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Jeez, you know. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 9, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 39. Okay, it is a 76 card deck. Oh, shoot. no, make that 4 more. So it was 51, so it becomes 55, which becomes 25 plus 2. I think I did 27. So it did end up in an 81 card deck, which is a little large. Which, sorry about that, took me a second. Which you might say, okay, that's a little large of a deck. But you have to remember, I have a lot of scrying and card draw in here. And you'll see under green, I have card search, where I search for a lot of lands. And this can mitigate deck size. Since I'm meant to cycle through a lot of cards very quickly, and that helps mitigate it definitely. Granted, I think there are probably, I want to play test it a little more. I've only played with it a few times. And maybe I'll cut out some things later on. Things like the Fairy Miscreants might be able to go away. They're decent because they're quick drops. But there's like maybe a dozen cards I could probably consider cutting out of here to cut it down closer to the 60 mark. I don't think I'll ever hit that. That's a good one. How smoothly do my plays plan out? I've had a couple of good runs with this deck. I've had a couple of ones that aren't as good. It depends on the kind of deck I'm facing against. This is medium speed, I'd call it. It needs a little bit to get going, but it's not like the super slow. It's not a super slow deck. I can start getting some stuff out quickly and efficiently, and especially under the control side. So, and I'm pretty decent with the number of creatures I have and a couple ways of creating tokens. So, I mean, as long as I'm not playing against a too fast deck, a fast deck could probably shut me down. Speed decks, unless you're using a speed deck, they're very hard to counteract. That's going to be every time, and that's not something you can actually deny. You know, you can attempt to overcome a speed deck and live long enough that they putter out, and that's the best thing you can do. And then once they've puttered out, you can easily gain control. But another medium speed deck, I found myself pretty good. Long-term deck play, I think, is not as good. I need to press myself relatively quickly at this deck. I don't have a lot of really, really great late game stuff. So you want to aim for medium game win, basically is what it is. So, you know, once people are getting 6 or 7 mana, that's when you have to start thinking about claiming victory. Because if other people turtle too long, they're probably going to get more win conditions than I'm going to have in this deck. So that's the important thing. And it's all about controlling the battlefield, eliminating as much of your opponent's creatures as you can with various tricks, and also about getting as much stuff out as you, drawing more and more stuff to play more and more stuff, and to basically swarm control, which we'll see a little bit more of. But let's move on from Shadows in the Past. And so I've said my plans for this deck in playing it have panned out decently so far, from like the 5 times I've played it now. I would like again to play it more. I think I'm about 50-50 on victories currently. But again, I'm not trying for the best deck I can possibly do. If I wanted the best Origin deck, I would have bought a bunch of actual singles in Origins and planned that way. I'm playing off of what I have. So maybe, again, refining it maybe a little bit after I've play tested a while and seeing what really I need and don't need might be a way to improve this, which I might do at some point in time. Way to the Underworld. This is an important one because it gives a creature -3/-2. This can, for one thing, make a creature have enough power and toughness to be killable by my stuff. Second thing, combined with Blightcaster, I can give something -5/-4. I can shrink something and then shrink it again and kill off pretty big creatures that way. I could neuter your really big creature and kill off another smaller creature you have using Way to the Underworld. So I have 2 Ways to the Underworld. Animist's Awakening, one of the rares I have in the deck. Reveal the top X cards of your library. It's an X cost spells. Reveal all land cards and put them in the battlefield. Tapped. Put the rest in the bottom of your library in a random order. Okay, you get a lot of lands. If you have a lot of mana and you know you still need more mana, this might be a way of getting it. Granted, with card drawing, you oftentimes want mana. It's an important thing. If there are 2 or more instants or sorceries in your graveyard, untap those lands. That's a great one. This can combo into a lot of stuff, especially if I have a couple of instants or sorceries in my graveyard. I can search for a whole bunch of lands, and then just be able to play more stuff from my hand. It's as simple as that. So there's very good use for Anima's Awakening. It's going to be circumstantial when it will really come up the exact decent nature of it. Cost a Caterpillar. It's a 1/1 for 1, but for a green and a colorless, I can sacrifice to destroy an artifact or enchantment. This is good because A, it's a creature, meaning I can block with it if necessary, and I can also then destroy artifacts and enchantments. You want some kind of artifact and enchantment removal, that's always good. Removal of kind of key things my opponents might have, always a good thing. I have 2 of these guys in here. They're a little more difficult than something like a Naturalize, but there wasn't really a cheap artifact or an enchantment destruction in green in this set that I had. So this was the easiest way, and because I have some creature resurrection, a little bit of it, I could theoretically bring it back. Elemental Bond. Now, we really haven't seen any, but I do have, I know we will be hitting a bunch of them, creatures with the power of 3 or greater. This is one that I might consider also removing, because granted, I have a bunch of big creatures in this deck, but getting this out with a bunch of them, that it makes it worth it. But when a creature with power 3 or greater enters the battlefield under my control, I draw a card. This would be from the Necromantic Summons. If it would come with the 2+1/+1 counters, anything I would get back would be 3 or more. I have 2 of these. These allow me to draw a card. And these aren't may, though, so I have to draw a card. That's the important. You have to watch the language. There are times when it says may draw a card, and when it just says draw a card. When it says may, it's an option. When it doesn't, it's not an option. You've got to do it. If you missed it, it means you have to go back and do it because you were supposed to do it. You are making a mistake. If it's may and you miss it, oh well. And if you're playing someone, they should respect that. Yes, if it doesn't say may, you are supposed to be doing it, and they should continue pointing it out. If it says may, screw them. Don't tell them about it. If they miss it, they miss it. You know, forget it. But again, we're going to start looking at some of the big creatures in this deck, which will play off of this. There's about a dozen or so of them. So, I mean, that is a decent amount. If you consider the 80 card deck, that is still about an eighth of the deck is big creatures. So getting one of these 2 out with some of those, I'm bound to draw more cards. Elvish Visionary. It's a 1/1 for 2 mana. You draw a card. 2 of them. The reason behind this, of course, is I get a creature, something to block with, something to use, and I get a card. I replace it. Elvish Visionary is good that way, because I replace it as soon as I play it. I get something else to replace it, and I still get a creature. And it's only 2 mana, meaning it's actually really good. It's really 1/1 for 1 green mana, and for another 1, you draw a card, which there isn't that cheap of a draw of card normally. So Elvish Visionary is very good that way. Hence why 2 of them. Now, we got Gaia's Revenge. It's the first of our big creatures. It's an 8/5, can't be countered, haste. Can't be the target of non-green spells or abilities from non-green sources. This is important language, so it can't be countered. That's always good. It is an 8/5. It is haste. I can throw it out there. I got 2 of them. I managed to get 2 of these rares. It can't be the target of non-green spells or abilities from non-green sources. That means I couldn't play any of my black or blue enchantments on there. I couldn't play the thing where it gets +2/+0, and when it dies, it dies. I don't have a lot of... The thing is, when it's in my graveyard, it's not targeted, so I can Necromantic Summon it from my graveyard, because it doesn't have that ability unless it's in play. But other than that, I mean, it is an 8/5 for 7 mana. It's not bad, and its defensive abilities means it's harder to deal with from opponents. So that's why it's useful. Now I do have 1 of Jorga's Invocation. Each creature you control gets +3/+3 until end of turn and must be blocked this turn if able. It gets all your creatures bigger. That's an important thing. They all get +3/+3. The words must be blocked this turn if able is important words too. It means that, let's say for example, I'm attacking with 5 creatures, and my opponent has 4 creatures open. That means they can't leave any creatures that they have, unless they have some way of tapping it and removing it from combat, from blocking. They have to block with everything. They have to choose to block each of my creatures. Each one of them must be blocked. I mean, you could buddy block. It's as long as you're using all available creatures that your opponent... As long as your opponent is using effectively all available creatures and at least blocking each one of your creatures, or using all of them. Your opponent couldn't leave one creature open unless all of mine are blocked. Granted, again, if I have 3 creatures that I'm attacking with and my opponent has 7, they could choose to put 1, 1, and 5, but they would have to do that way. Or they could just do 1, 1, 1, 3 for 3, and leave their other 4 creatures open. That's also just an option with this. It doesn't stop that. But my creatures are +3/+3 much bigger, so... It's very good in its own ways. It also gets your kittings bigger. We have 2 Leaf Gilders. Tap for a green mana, 2 1s. Pretty simple. They're mana production. These are mana production that aren't from lands. It's some of the few that I don't have. I really have 4 cards in here that don't come from land. This is just some extra mana, because we see we have a couple of big creatures here which are going to cost you extra mana, so you're going to want to be ready to throw out that mana for them. My foil, Mana Gorger Worm, is a 1/1 trample. Whenever a player casts a spell, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. A player. A spell is basically every card we've talked about. Everything that's not a land, normally when you're playing it, is playing a spell. There are some exceptions of putting cards into play, or searching for cards and putting them into play, or effects that happen when you discard a card, but we're not talking about any of these. When I pay mana and use some kind of spell, put out a permanent, put out a creature, an artifact, an enchantment, I cast instant or sorcery, +1/+1 counter. This is me, my opponent, all of my opponents. So if I'm playing multiplayer, this thing gets big very fast. Very fast. So that's why it's a very good one to put in here, because this is my big multicolored crown card, because it can get very big, and I can just be like, trample, growl, against my opponents. Niece's Pilgrimage, 2 of them. You search for 2 basic forest cards, reveal them, put them into the battlefield, tap. Put 1 in the battlefield, put the rest in your hand. So basically I search for 2 basic forests, put 1 in my battlefield, 1 in my hand, shuffle my library. If I've cast 2 or more spells, I search for 3 basic lands instead of 2. And basically I have 3 extra lands in my hand. Now, I don't have a huge amount of forests in this deck that it would be super great for Niece's Pilgrimage, but it's still pretty good. It's still getting 2 lands, and depending on when I'm getting this spell, it could be useful. The other uses for it is I could cast it even when I don't have forests in my deck anymore, if I know I've ran out of forests, but it applies to Spell Mastery then. And maybe not this one's Spell Mastery isn't as important, but I might have Spell Mastery from something else that I haven't had activated yet, and I want to. Bam. It sets it up for it. So there are still uses for this, even if I do run out of forest, which could theoretically happen. This is another reason that maybe cutting down a color wouldn't be bad, but we don't have a lot of land search that's not green. Niece's Revelation. Scry 5. Reveal the top card of your library. If it's a creature, draw cards equal to its power, gain life equal to its toughness. Alright. Look at the top 5 cards in my library. I choose to either put them on the bottom of my library, or put them back on top in an order of my choosing. I put a big creature, or some kind of creature from those 5, on the top of my library. If I don't draw a creature in those 5, I get rid of all of them, and I just see what shows up. And then if it's a creature card, draw cards equal to its power, gain life equal to its toughness. Both are really good. So Niece's Revelation can be very useful. Only one of these. Outland Colossus. I got 2 of these. So, it can't be blocked by more than 1 creature. That's an important thing. So that means you can only block this with a single creature if you're going to block it. When the creature deals combat damage to a player, if it's not renowned, it becomes renowned and gets 6 +1/+1 counters. It becomes a 12/12. So, yeah, I want to have this thing hit a player as quickly as possible to get it to be a 12/12. That can only be blocked by one of my opponent's creatures. Because then I have a big old thing that you can only chump block. That more than likely you're not going to have a 12/12 to block it. 2 of these in the deck. Skystare Smiter. I don't have a particular huge amount of flying, so this helps with flying. It's a 6/6 Vigilance Reach. Reach meaning it can block creatures with flying. Vigilance meaning it doesn't tap to attack. For 6 mana, this is really good. This spider is very excellent, and that's why it's in here. It's big, it eats a lot of flying things. It's like, it just devours the flying creatures that come at you. Zendakar's Royal. It's an enchantment, so we're playing off the enchantments we had before. When a land enters the battlefield under control, put a 2/2 elemental creature token in the battlefield. Got 2 of these. This produces creatures for me. Granted, they're only 2/2s, so we're not throwing off the other enchantment we have, but they're an army I can build up with lands. And it just says when a land enters the battlefield. So if I play this something with the Nisas, where I put 1 into the battlefield, and then I can play another, and I got both of them out, that's 4 elementals in the course of a turn. And at least every time I play a land, which because I'm card drawing, I should have a lot of lands in my hand, an elemental per turn, maybe 2 if I've got both of them out. So you can see there's useful that I can build up an army because I'm supposed to be getting lots of land. Or there's other lands, which I'm going to talk about, which will give me 2 lands by their sheer existence. We'll talk about that in just a minute because we're almost to lands themselves. But right now, let's talk about artifacts. Hangerback Walker. It's an XX, so it does cost a lot of mana to make this really useful. But the effects of the X we will be doing in the course of gameplay. So it enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters. Boom. So if I had 8 mana, I could have a 4/4 one of these. But for a single mana and tapping it, I can put a +1/+1 counter. I can get it bigger still. But when it dies, I get a 1/1 colorless Thopter creature token with flying for each +1/+1 counter on it. So I want to keep getting it bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And then I actually want it to die because then I have a swarm. And then my swarm, which flies, I can combine it with something, let's say, like Jorga's Invocation, and they're now 4/4s. I can hit you with a swarm of 4/4 flyers. Hangerback Walker. Mage Ring Responder. It doesn't untap during your untap step, so that kind of sucks. And it costs you 7 mana to untap it. But when it attacks, it deals 7 damage to target creature defending player controls. It effectively can just kill something when it attacks. I attack with it, something dies, I can pay mana to untap it then, you know, whenever. So you never know when it's going to be ready to untap and attack again and kill something else. Got 2 of these in here. Major Responder is a good way of dealing with certain things. And then guess what? I've got my Necromantic Summons that I can steal something that I just killed with the Major Responder. If it's something really good that I want now. Meteorite, I got 2 of them. When enters the battlefield, does 2 damage to target creature or player. Taps for any color mana. Now granted, it is expensive. It is 5 before you can get 2 of any before you can get any color mana. But the 2 damage is pretty good. So it kind of like you hit someone with a meteorite, and then you get mana. Warhorn. Attacking creatures you control get +1/+0. Got 1 of these in here. It just makes things like my elementals and my Thopters that I can create, and any of the other smaller creatures that I have, bigger and meaner. So you can see how I'm kind of formulating this. I have blue to control, black to control, green to build my army, and there we go. I've got the green for my attacking and army, the other 2 colors to manage the battlefield and control things until I've got enough of an army to crush my opponents and to move in and smash them to bits. It works off of each other to build this entire combo of things. Evolving Wilds. I have 4 of this one. It's you tap, sacrifice it, search your library for basic land card, put it in battlefield, tapped. This is the one that I use, of course, with the Zendikar Royal to get 2 lands a turn, or 2 elementals a turn. Also, these allow me to find the lands I need for my hand, which is very important. These 4 are pretty critical to finding what I need to actually be able to play what I need. I should get one of these. It's sort of like, yes, I'm set. Rogue's Passion. Taps for a colorless, but that's not the big thing. 4, tap. Target creature can't be blocked this turn. I make something unblockable. I make my big 8/5 unblockable. I make my giant, who has Renown, unblockable. Now he's a 12/12 for the next time he attacks instead of a 6/6. And guess what? I had Warhorn out, so he was a 7/6. He did you 7 damage. Next time he attacks, he will be a 13. You're going to be at 1. And if I haven't done something else to damage you over the course of the game, you're ready to be set up and killed in 2 turns. And it only cost me 4 mana. I could easily play something on top of this guy and make him even more murderous, kill you in just those 2 turns. There are other massive combos with it. Making something unblockable, excellent. Rogue's Passage is a big thing to put in here. I'm sad I only got 1 of them, but hey, it's worth it. Yavimaya Coast. This is if I'm desperate for blue or green mana. It taps for a colorless, or it can tap for blue or green and deal me 1 damage. It's the only one of the pain lands I got, but it's not bad. It's just not great. That's a good way of saying it. It's not great. It's not bad, but not great either. It does its job in case of it. Okay, so then we have 8 islands, 6 swamps. Oh, whoops, wrong direction. 8 forests. 20 lands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 22. 22 lands. Basic lands. There's enough forests here that theoretically the Nisa's ones, unless I'm really, really late game, will find some forests. 2? Yes. 3? I don't know. Maybe. The chances of getting so many forests out that it's going to be helpful, questionable. The search for 3, very questionable. But black is not nearly as important a color, so there's less black in here. We have more green and blue. Hence the ratio I did. I could still tweak with the ratio a little bit. But again, we're also considering that we are 28 lands in. That's a bunch of lands. That's a lot of lands. That's why we're at 81 cards in the deck. Well, technically 82, but you know what I'm talking about to a degree. Oh, no, it's 82. Yeah. Let's talk about these cards, which came in one of the special sets. You needed to get like a little starter pack or something, and these came in them. But these are cards that are beyond the normal numbers. They are technically part of the set, but they aren't sold in the normal set. So you have to get something special to get them. I did add 4 of them in here. I had the Mahamuti Djinn. It's a 5/6 flyer for 6 mana. It's pretty decent. It's pretty good. It's just a big flyer. I need another creature that was big and mean, and this was the perfect idea for it. I did not add the Nightmare, which was an option because I don't have nearly enough swamps to make it big enough. Instead, I added the Sengir Vampire, another classic 4/4 flyer that if a creature that it dealt damage to dies, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. I use it to block smaller creatures, eat them up, make it bigger, that sort of thing. Or I attack with it when my opponent only has small flyers that will be eaten up and make it bigger. Prized Unicorn. All creatures able to block it do so. It's kind of an obvious reason why I would play this is I would attack someone with Prized Unicorn and then attack them with other creatures to kill them. Because they could only block Prized Unicorn, and all the rest of my creatures would have to be just go through, hit them, and murder them. Granted, they could have something like a fog or similar effect that would prevent combat damage, that would stop it, but Prized Unicorn is a way of murdering someone off. And finally, an 8/8 Trample, can't be countered, Terra Stomper. Can't be countered, great way of keeping it out, and it's a trample. 8/8 Trample is just mean and big, and it's only 6 mana for an 8/8 Trample, so it is actually a good mana cost for what you get out of it. It definitely is. But that is actually my Origins deck. And as I said, I've played it about, I think, 6 times now I've had a chance to play it. And I do feel like I might need to tweak it a little bit as of right now. But I will update the tweak list. I still actually have to put up the Merfolk list online, which I have to remember to do, and the Zoblin list, and this one. I might go on Saturday and put a bunch of the deck lists up so that you can check out those online if you want to see all the full deck lists that way, with some pricing guides. Granted, I'm reminding you, no, I got all this stuff through just the stuff I bought, which was 3 products, effectively. Fat Pack, Booster Box, which, granted, Booster Box is 36 packs, And then the stuff that had the promotional things like the Terror Stomper there, which, as you can see, is number 288 out of 272, if you can't see it all the way at the bottom there of its set number. Yeah, that's... It's more than the actual set number. It should have been, yeah, 288 out of 272. I like these little, like, special ones that you can only get in a special place. They're fun. They're interesting. But, yeah. Yeah, if you guys have any more questions, go ahead and ask them either now, or you can catch me on the Discord to talk about this a little bit more, or you can catch me over the YouTube in the comments if you want to know more about any of these things or the reason why I put them in. But you can see my kind of technique that I was doing there. I have a bunch of card draw and cycling, so I'm going to go through a lot of cards in my deck. I have some control. I basically make sure my opponent, or sometimes opponents, are off guard. They're defensive. Then I build up tokens and big creatures and combine those two together to overrun my opponents and crush them. So I'm using green for my aggression, while I'm using my black and blue to control my opponents. And it's an interesting combination of things. Granted, I might be able to eliminate one of the colors. I don't think it really would work very well with the way I've built the deck. Like green, I need it to really get the aggression in to kill people. And the blue and the black, I don't think by themselves would necessarily control things. I don't know if there's any better cards to, unfortunately, replace some of the ones here to be better than others. But I know there's a couple that I said, like, I could maybe eliminate and streamline the deck. I might at some point in time give it maybe another half a dozen more times of trying to play it out and see about it. I have other decks which are older, which have had much more play testing. As I said, if I would talk to you about one of my Scars decks, I've played them like at least a dozen or a couple dozen times, and I could tell you they are well refined and deadly. If given the right circumstances. Some are faster than others. Again, you have to consider the slow, medium, and fast, or the slow, medium, and fast decks. And this is a medium deck, definitely. So, all right, everyone. I think that's enough for today. I'm going to go off and, you know, again, you can check out this if you missed part of it on the VOD up on my channel. It should be up tomorrow on YouTube. The deck list will be going up sometime this weekend. I will update that. I'll put the updates on the other deck delves, the deck lists, when I have a chance to. You can always catch me on Discord, Twitter, in the chat here, in the questions and comments on the YouTube. All of those about asking about the deck and more things about my processes. All right.